All right, fellas, this is slide 7 in our Industrial Revolution unit. The new industrial America. Let's talk about how America is changing with all this new technology, new inventions, move to factories, and so forth. The South would still be the least industrialized part of the world. There's more industry in the West even than the South. The South would produce the smallest percentage of the manufactured goods in the country. Right? But there are two areas that it actually does better than the North. The first one is in tobacco. The invention of machines that rolled cigarettes. The days of hand-rolled cigarettes were gone. Machines now rolled cigarettes. And there you see a picture of the American Tobacco Company in 1926. That's not when it was founded, but a little later. The picture there. It was founded by a man named James Duke. You see his picture down here. Duke founded the American Tobacco Company. He would later donate a lot of money to a local college called Trinity College, of all things. Donate a lot of money to Trinity College in Durham, North Carolina. And in his honor, they renamed it Duke University. So Duke University, named after this guy here, James Duke, founder of the American Tobacco Company. Now, one of the reasons that tobacco companies do well in the South is because that's where the tobacco is. They go where the natural resources are that you need. And it makes no sense to build a cigarette manufacturing plant in the North and ship tobacco all the way from the South. Just go build your factories in the South. And that's what Duke does here. The other area the South does have an advantage is in textiles. Now, textiles are anything made of cloth, right? And here you see a picture of a textile mill there. Anything made of cloth. So, same thing with tobacco. Why build in the South? Because that's where your raw material is, cotton. Why pay to ship cotton all the way to the North to turn it into clothing and other cloth goods when you could just build your factories in the South? Factory owners would build them in very low-income areas where they didn't have to pay much because even a low-income factory job was better than no job at all. So the two areas the South does do a little better than the North, tobacco and textiles. But the South will always lag behind when it comes to industry. That's just not where they make their money. Now, part of the problem the South has is the fact that there's still a lot of resentment here. We're only 50, maybe 40, 50 years removed from the Civil War. There's still that same generation that grew up with it. Still a lot of resentment between the North and the South. And that's where something called Pittsburg Plus pricing comes in. Right? Now, this is meant to help the steel industry in the North and hurt the young, trying to grow steel industry in the South. Okay? The big steel capital of the North is in Pittsburg. That's why the football team is called the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's where Carnegie sets up his steel fortune, in Pittsburgh. Okay? So this concept here, it's another business tactic, is a way to help Northern steel and hurt Southern steel. The simple definition is simply that you charge, it's for a railroad, okay? You charge your railroad rates, you charge as if everything was being shipped from Pittsburgh, okay? The rates you pay are as if it's being shipped from Pittsburgh, no matter where it's actually being shipped from, okay? The steel in the North was a little better than the South, but The pricing is really what's going to doom the South. Now, if somebody will remind me, I'll draw a little thing on the board here and help illustrate just how this screws the South over and helps the northern steel industry. Okay, so remind me of that in class. Hopefully before you take your quiz here. Okay, moving on here. Let's talk for just a second here about the Gibson Girl. We said earlier when we were talking about new inventions that middle-class women had new opportunities available to them, new work opportunities. Okay, lower-class women are working in factories. Middle-class women could get good career jobs. Okay, typists, secretaries, phone operators, and so forth. So middle-class women suddenly had new opportunities that they'd never had before. And that's where this image of the Gibson Girl comes in. Okay? The Gibson Girl is an advertisement in a magazine. Okay? And this is a picture of the model for the Gibson Girl. Her name, you can see there, is Camille Clifford. Okay? Camille Clifford. She was the Gibson Girl. And she becomes this image, this ideal model for the new modern middle and upper class woman. So they're young, they're beautiful, they're athletic, they're outgoing, they're physically fit, they have careers of their own, lives of their own. It's the new modern woman for the early 20th century, the early 1900s. Okay? The Gibson Girl appears in a magazine called Gibson's. Okay? So there you see Camille Clifford, the model for the Gibson Girl, and a stamp commemorating it there. Okay? Okay. The Industrial Revolution would also see a lot of class division because the majority of America doesn't look like this or this. They don't have lots of money. Majority of America is living paycheck to paycheck, hoping they get to the next one by working in factories. Okay? By 1900, the turn of the century, 90% of the wealth in this country, 90% of the money in the country, belonged to 10% of the people. So that means the other 90% of the people only have 10% of the money to live on. That's it. Divided amongst themselves. Right? So we see a real class division. There is a wealthy upper class and there is a poor working class, with a few middle class people smattered in the middle. Okay? But there is a serious class division during this time. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, barely making it, hoping they have a job next week. We said assembly lines make you easily replaceable. They allow for lots of things to be built very cheaply so lots of people can buy things. But they also mean that you're not guaranteed a job. You can be replaced very quickly and very easily. Who's doing all this work in the factories? Women and children, mainly. Right? Well, I don't want to say mainly. A lot of women and children. Okay? Men still did the bulk of the work because it was heavy, hard work. A lot of lifting, a lot of difficult work. But if they could, okay, employers actually preferred women and children. For one reason, they paid women half of what men got paid. For working the same job on the same assembly line, women were paid half of what men were paid. And they were happy to have the job because they had to have it to pay the bills. Okay? Children were paid half of what women were paid for working in factories. And employers especially liked children, not just because they were dirt cheap, but because they were small. They were tiny. Right? Children were often used to repair machines. When these big, huge machines in these factories broke down, men couldn't fit inside the machine to repair it, to fix it, to rethread it, whatever needed done. Children were often told to reach in there and fix that, or literally climb in the machine and fix it. Children often died at work. Children worked in factories as young as 8, 10 years old, right? Because their family needed the money to pay the bills, to pay the rent, to buy the food, to buy medicine. Child labor is very, very common during this time. Not just that it's common, that it's preferred. Right? And in class, here our next class, we're going to look at a PowerPoint of some slides of the different jobs that children did and just what it was like to grow up as a working class child during the Industrial Revolution.